Wow, this is amazing to see. Super stoked to be here tonight in beautiful Montreal and see so many new faces and old faces that I haven't seen in a long time. So thank you so much for coming tonight. And I want to give big thanks to Max for making this happen. He worked really hard for the past year for having us all together here. It's a big round of applause. Niha, Michelle, and everybody else that I just met today also have been doing an amazing job making these presentations and making this happening hopefully every month from now on. So yeah, I guess I want to say compliment for what Michelle was saying about my 20 years of career. I like to divide that in two different halves. My first 10 years, I was working on animal sounds, which is a bit unusual. And the second half is my game audio career. And I want to mention this mainly because these first 10 years that I worked with animal sounds, I spent a lot of time with scientists and biologists. And I learned something that is the reason why I'm standing here today, and was how to learn about the environment that is around me and learn about the small things that you don't notice when you're walking over to grab a coffee or buy groceries. And those little things that they notice are the ones that spark the interest in me of, wow, there's a whole lot of a world out there that I haven't noticed before. I want to make that world accessible to people. I want to build immersive experiences that will be positive and also inspire people to just have a good time. So that's why I decided to go back to school, learn about this game audio stuff, and kind of bring the best out of both worlds and do ambiances. So ambiances is my passion. I have to say, this today is going to be a different kind of presentation because Skate is not finished. We're like pre-alpha, which means a lot of the content that you will see tonight is temp, nothing pretty or polished. You're going to see test levels, something that is very unusual. So I feel happy to be able to share things like that behind the scenes that usually we're not allowed to, thanks to EA and Skate. They cleared us. I can't show a lot of like Frostbite stuff, but a lot of it is possible. And it's also nice to just see what's the process of making something. So sometimes we just focus on the end product and how cool it sounds, how great it looks. But what about the process? And I think there is a lot to learn about the process, and hopefully it will be inspiring for you for your own work. So yeah, there it is. So let's get started. So the presentation will take about 50 minutes, and we'll leave questions at the end. Enough. We're going to have also enough time to network, so we could chat if you don't want to raise your hands in front of everyone. So it's all cool. First of all, I want to give you an idea of what the game of Skate is about. And then what are the goals behind audio for developing a system or an ambient system that will support the sound of the city where Skate is taking place. And then we'll go into the key concepts of the ambient system that we're developing. How are we adding that content into the game? And then we're going to wrap it up and with Q&A. So how many of you are familiar with the Skate franchise? Oh, wow. That's a lot of people. Great. So you probably played the game before or heard about it or watched a video about it. Great. So if you're not familiar with it, just going to give you a quick overview. Skate started out in 2007. That was the first Skate, and then it got Skate 2 and Skate 3. Skate takes place in a fictional city. So it's not a real city, but it's a city. And it was really popular. And back in 2010, fans were asking to get a new Skate. And after 10 years, EA decided to bring it back. So in 2020, the Skate franchise is back. And the studio Full Circle is the franchise that was formed to develop this game. The cool thing about this game is that we're developing with the community's input. So that's why we're allowing people to see our work, because we want people to get feedback. And based on that feedback, we want to continue to develop and make changes and steer in different ways. So there's 3 different groups of people that are helping us develop the skate. The first group is the player council, and these people are mainly skateboard fans that were playing the previous games, and they were very familiar with the game, and they're giving us feedback on the new game that we're developing. The second group of people is the community council, and it's made out of like a broader set of players from different demographics. So we want to try and get different angles from different people and spread out a bit more. So we're not just focusing on people that like to skate, but people that are doing other things that might just have fun, basically. So that's why we're doing a broader set of group of people. And the third group of people, you can actually be part of them, is what we call the insiders. It's anybody over 18 years old that wants to take place on our external play tests. They happen every 2 months, and we just basically let people play our game for about a week or so, and all we ask is to get feedback. And then we use that feedback to work on that, and then we do that every two months. We started doing that about a year ago, and there's actually one external play test happening right now that is going up until Tuesday. So if you're interested in hearing what the progress of Skate, you can join those external play tests. I'm assuming next one will be around November or something, we'll see. But keep an eye on the official channels and you will be able to join. We are having a cross-platform experience, so we're supporting PC, all the consoles, and we're currently exploring mobile, which is a big challenge. So that's brewing. And we're also going to be a live service game. So there's a lot of moving parts that are happening. The short-term goal is to be able to allow those external playtests to be always on. So you could actually join the playtest at any time. But for now, we're just opening them for a few days, closing them up, and continuing. Great. The Skate team is a very small team. We're still in pre-pro. But it's a very strong tech-oriented team, mainly because we want to focus on building a really strong foundation of things that later on are going to be useful for making content and all that. So our team is all in North America. Some of us are on the East Coast and some of us are on the West Coast. There's a few people from the team here tonight, which is really nice to see. And yeah, but we're basically expanding eventually, but for now we're keeping small to make sure we have the right tools and the right infrastructure to continue with the game. When you hear about skate, you're usually thinking, oh, skate is about skating, right? But there's a lot of things that a player can do besides skating. So they can climb, they can jump, they can build things, they can play as a group, they can take videos. There's a whole lot of things that a player can do. So this is all like test levels, very raw still, but you get an idea of all the things they can do. And that's what I actually like about this game, because it's a collaborative game and it's non-violent, it's chill. You just get to play and hang out with your friends or peers, and it's just fun and light. So to me, it's a fun game to start developing, to contribute with the sound of the city and just kind of, yeah, have fun. So let's move on to the test level. You're going to see a lot of that. That's where we spend most of our time during the past 2 years, mainly because we wanted a place for everybody to start building the city and like kind of playing around with it. So we created a small downtown to pretend it was a city, and everybody in the dev team, lighting, sandbox, audio, everybody was just playing in that level just to make it, build it slowly and make some tests. And if it breaks, it's okay. there is a new level that is the actual real city that we started using a few months ago, probably like 3 months ago. That is going to be available in the play tests that are running right now. I will show you a video at the end of the presentation, I promise. But I want to focus on this one mainly because that's where we spend most of our time. And as you can see, there's not a lot to see. So the gray blocks, very raw, like trees. Everything is very blocky. But it just to give you an idea of what is it like a city will look like. There are some areas within this map, this test level, that look a little bit more polished. And that's where we spend most of our time, just because with context, it just gives us more like a better idea. So this is street. There is a plaza and an alley around here. Those are these plots that we chose to start developing the ambient system. They just mainly just look a bit more real than the other areas. So this is gameplay footage from the May playtest. So there's a last playtest that we did in this test level. Just so you have an idea what it's sounding like. You will hear mostly skateboard sounds and a little bit of background in the background, like ambience. But just so you're familiar with what we're talking about. So I'm just going to play this and check levels. There you are. So that's what you could be doing if you're joining the next playtest. Great. Well, let's move on to audio goals. So now we know what the game is about. Now, how can audio support this? How can we build a sound cityscape to make this come to life? So we have a main goal for that. And the goal is to make sure players have a great experience in the city. That's all we want. So we want to inspire players to explore an open world city, drive their imagination like different areas, and just allow them to discover. That's our main goal. But we also have a challenge. Make a real city sound fun. And that's one of the main focuses that we're doing right now with the ambient system. How do we make this city be fun and fun for everybody, not just for people that are skating? So we identified some city audio traits. What would a city sound like if it was fun? So it's like vibrant, dynamic, fun, lively, a lot of like very out there words, lots of colors, lots of movement, contrasts, right? How do we make all those things happen in a city? So we identified two halves to do this. One half is the tech half. We need to build a system that supports all the things that we want to do in the city. And the second half is content. We want to find good content, that style, that supports the narrative of the game. All those things combined, hopefully, will make for these city traits. Right now, we're focusing on the first half. How do we build something that's strong enough as a system so we can start making something that's going to support this? One of the main ideas that we have for the ambient system is to use contrast. Meaning, if a player is standing in an alley that is all enclosed and maybe a bit quiet, and then you go and skate all the way to the street, you want to be hit by a wave of traffic and pedestrians and people and horns and all that. And that contrast between areas is going to make people feel like they're in a very different location. So that's one of our main goals for building this system. Right, so now that we know what we want to build, we need to start building it. This is the sound activity, frostbite sound activity screen, for the ones who are not familiar with it. And for the prototype, we spent countless hours on Zoom calls, discussing what do we want to build, how do we want to build it. And once we figure out roughly what we wanted to do, we start writing documents, right? Let's put this on paper, try to get as many examples as we can, and start thinking about how are we going to prototype this into our engine. We're using Frostbite, that's our game engine. It's a proprietary tool from EA. So this is where we're developing for this system. And Dylan Sundberg is one of our audio programmers. He's the one doing the magic behind this, making all those conversations, all those things on paper, become real in Frostbite. So I'm allowed to test them out, and we can all discuss them and make changes. So he's not here tonight, but kudos to him for his amazing work on making this happening. The other thing I like about building this system is that it's a collaborative process. So it's not just me building something or not them. It takes a group of people talking, giving different points of view, different perspectives about the tool that is going to be used for a lot of different things. So we need a lot of different points of view. And all this is our wish list of the things that, of course, we would like to have for the system. So let's dive into the ambient system. I want to show you some of the concepts, the main concepts that we're using to develop the system. We're using location as one of the main points for developing the system to determine the behavior of the city, of the ambience. So pretend this is our city. Our city is called San Amsterdam. So it's San Francisco, Vancouver, and Amsterdam. So some sort of mix, that's what it's going to end up looking like, right? This is a city. Each area within the city will have its own sonic personality. So we want to have different content or different behaviors to make those areas sound different. But we also want to identify smaller regions within that area that also have specific traits. If I'm in a park in the middle of downtown, I want to feel like I'm in a park surrounded by trees and birds, but I also want to be able to hear all the traffic and horns around me. That same park in a neighborhood is going to sound different. It's also going to have trees, it's also going to have birds, but I'm going to hear less cars, kids playing, different sounds. So those are the things that we want to start thinking about and start driving contrast. We also want to do what we call the modular approach, where we can reuse the same behaviors or the same content or both in different areas. So we don't have to redo all the work and implementing and adding all the sounds again. We're just attaching a park into another area and we will get a park behavior. So that's one of our main concepts. This is a foundation of the system, what we call audio regions. And it's basically an area within the city with specific behaviors. And those behaviors are based on hierarchy, where there's a parent that has the global behaviors and children that have different behaviors. For the test level, the parent that we're using is the whole test level that we show you, so it's the downtown area. And the children that we were using as a prototype were the alley and a plaza. So you will be hearing a lot of those three throughout the talk. So this is our downtown, our parent region. The parent region holds global behaviors like, let's say, air conditioners. If we have air conditioners and we want to add sounds to those, and we want them to hear all around the city, we want to tag them in the global or parent region. If we want sounds to sound specifically in one area, like birds, we want to tag those directly into the child regions so you don't hear them anywhere else. So that's how we start dividing global regions and child regions into with different behaviors. How do we do that? We use tags. We call them audio region tags. And that's an ID that represents a unique tag for each region. And it's physically attached to the region and provides information of the location of the player in the area. This is also very helpful for the modular approach, because by using the park tag, we can just completely change the behavior of one area just by assigning the tag. So going back to our beautiful city, we have the tags, the unique ID for the tags, and then we're going to start adding content. So each region will have their own content, will have the global content for the entire city. And the idea behind that is that we're going to broadcast what is happening in the region to neighboring regions. And this is to inspire people to go and explore. So the idea of hearing things around the corner, like if you're in the street and then you hear maybe a glass breaking in the alley, you want to go and see what happened and go and explore. So you will be able to hear some of the content of the neighboring regions in your region. That's basically the idea. How do we implement that in Frostbite? We use volumes, physical volumes. We draw a volume for the entire area, and we attach a label to that. That will be the parent for the area. And then for the alley and the plaza, we make smaller volumes for the area and attach a label, and we're done. We ship it. Relevance. So this concept is very interesting. This is how influential is each region on the player. And we use this to find a way to blend two different regions and kind of cross-fading in a way. And we use that by something we call the activation distance. So if we have an activation distance of 10 meters and I'm on the street and this is the alley, as soon as I reach the 10-meter mark, I'm going to start hearing some of the alley sounds, even if I'm in the street. The closer I get to that alley, the more of that alley I'm going to hear and less of the street. So that's the idea behind that. Back to my drawings here. This is relevance. Every region has a budget of 1. So if the player is totally in the streets, that's going to be a budget of 1, relevance. As soon as the player starts moving towards another region, that budget is going to start going down, and the relevance of the other region is going to start going up. It makes sense. And that's how we also play with making things sound slightly different, depending on the location of the player. I'm going to try and give you, hopefully this makes more sense. This is a gameplay capture of trying to explain relevance. You will see a player walking from the street to an alley. As soon as the relevance or the region gets enough relevance, it will light up and it will become like brighter. And then as soon as the player leaves that area, the region will be like not shiny anymore. You will see on the left-hand side of the screen the relevance levels, so you can actually see visually what is happening while the player is walking from the street through the alley and heading towards the plaza. Make more sense than words, I think. Great. Well, now how do we add sound to this system? We have 3 different ambience elements that we're using. I'm going to go over them, so everybody uses different terminology for ambiances, so just to make sure we're on the same page. So we have beds, we have big worlds, little big worlds, and emitters. I like to use the photograph analogy, where ambiances are like a painting or a photograph, where the beds are the blurry sections that you see far away, and and they don't have a lot of detail, but they have enough detail that you can tell that it's a bed, like a distant traffic wash or maybe a brake squeal. That's what we call beds, and they're usually loops. Then there is another layer that we call big whirls and little big whirls. Those have some detail, but they're not real. They're not present in the world. So like a horn, you hear a horn, but you don't see it. That's called a big whirl. And we're introducing a new concept, or not a new, but at least different concept. It's called little big whirls. It's basically the same idea. It's something that you hear, but you don't see, but it's closer to you, like a leaf rustling near you. You don't need to see the leaf, but you can hear it. It's not weird, I guess. It's some sounds that are like there, but you don't notice them, I guess. So that's what we call little big whirls. They do have a bit more detail than the big whirls because they're playing closer, but they're still invisible. And the third layer is the emitters. Anything that is detailed, that is part of the world, that you can actually touch and see and hold on to, like an air conditioner, those are going to be called emitters. So those are the main concepts that we're going to be using tonight. Let's start with beds. We are using layers for beds. We're using 4 quad layers. And each of the layers have different frequency content, almost like when you're talking about music, each layer is kind of a different instrument. And the reason we decided to use that is because we're going to have more flexibility, making the city feel different by changing how much of one of the other we're going to hear in the area, in a specific area. And also, it will give us, it's going to be easier for transitions when you're going from one area to the other. We also want to use layers because we want to keep the same color palette in the entire region. So it's almost like if you're using the same tonality or the same key in a song, it's easier to combine the instruments. But if you're changing into a different bed that is slightly off, it's going to be harder. So this has been really useful and helpful, and we're using it hopefully in a bigger space. We're already trying in the new level on a bigger set of sounds and a bigger area. So far, so good. We are not having any problems with performance yet, so we're good. Things that we didn't consider, indoor spaces. We didn't really think about those until we saw the level. There is this church that you can skate, and we're like, oh, I guess we need to think about that. So we're still working on it, but we're figuring out those details as we go. This is the patch, the idea of the patch, just to show you roughly what we're using. So we have a basic random and pitch offset, and we're using amplitude LFO just to modulate it a little bit. We use raycasts to get information on how open or how enclosed are certain areas. So 0 means completely indoors, 1 means completely outdoors. And we're doing some DSP processing to make things feel slightly enclosed or open, plus all the changes in levels of the layers. So that's giving us a lot of variety. We're experimenting with height and just doing a small low-pass filter to make it feel slightly different. How do we add this to the game? It's great. We have each layer individually added into the game, and we have individual levels that we can tweak live. So it's great because you can play the game, tweak the layers, and the idea behind these layers is also, let's say you want you're in a plaza, maybe you want to hear more of the airy sounds and maybe less of the rumbly things, or maybe you're in in the alley, you want to lower your high end, but maybe you are more mids. So that's how we're trying to make things feel different. And a combination of level and DSP based on the enduriness value is giving us, so far, good results. So I'm going to play game capture with the beds. It's going to be a bit hard to hear the difference in this space. but hopefully you can hear some of it. I added on the right hand of the screen the levels of the layers changing, if that helps. But just so you have an idea how it feels, so you'll hear a little bit of everything, what we had so far on this level. Cool. Let's move on to big worlds. So we're using very generic downtown assets right now, all from library, just to represent a small set of sounds that will make it sound like a city. So like car buys, horns, car alarms, basic stuff. As I said before, we're not focusing on content, we're focusing on the system. What we used the opportunity for this was to start thinking about how are we going to organize those assets. So I'm processing those assets offline with a little bit of EQ and a little bit of reverb, so they already sound a bit mid-distant. But most of the processing is done on Engine. And we're using this also to establish early on mastering guidelines. So what are the good plugins that we're going to use, the levels that we're going to set, all that is already set. And naming conventions is a big one, not only on ambiances, but throughout audio, like skateboard, UI, music, all throughout audio. We already have a good spreadsheet with all the naming conventions, starting early, making sure that we are not getting a messy session, and then they're going to be hard to go back. Some of you are nodding. Yes. That's very common. So we're hoping things are going to stay nice and clean, and we're just keeping tidy. We have nice folders. Everything is great. So all good. In terms of the patch, random pitch and gain as usual. That's all good. I like to use high pass and low pass in the patches to do small tweaks of the sound in context with the game. So if there's a car buy that maybe has a lot of low end, just go in the patch and remove a little bit of that without having to go back to my DAW and change it. So it saves time. Distance, that was a good one that we included. So big worlds are meant to be heard far away, right? You're not supposed to hear a car buy really close if there is not a car. When we were developing this, we didn't know that players could climb. If players could climb, they can also fall from high altitude, and they could eventually reach a car by they're not supposed to hear very quickly. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to avoid that? So we decided to do a minimum audible distance. So we have big worlds spawning, let's say 50 meters away, and if player is falling from the rooftop of a building, we're just going to start nicely fading out that sound or killing it if we can, so they don't reach that sound if they're going too fast. So that's a safety net that we have. For space, we do occlusion and obstruction calculations, some reverb and some reflections, and also our low pass filter for height. Height is getting a bit better. We did a pass on that recently, but we're still using low pass for big worlds. How are we adding this to the game? So this is an important piece in the ambient system puzzle, and it's called a behavior asset. The behavior asset is a primary way where we define the behaviors of the sounds that are playing in the game. And those assets are meant to provide the recipe of how, where, and when a sound should play at any given time. It operates under a concept called density, and that's how much of that sound we want to hear at any given time. Do we want to hear a busy city with lots of horns, or we want to hear maybe 1 or 2 horns in a neighborhood? So depending on how busy or how much of the sound we want to hear, we adjust that density value. It goes from 0, no horns, to 1, traffic jam. We are using looping and retriggering sounds. And the behavior asset is split into 2 sections, the playback section and the positional section. We also want to use density to try and explore other things, like if the player is idling and doing nothing, we want to bring up that density a little bit so they hear more of the city. If they're busy skating or playing with their friends, maybe they're not interested in the city. So we're playing a little bit with that. And hopefully we'll incorporate some of mixed things in there, so things start to feel slightly different depending on what the player is doing at any given time. For the playback settings is basically establishing how we want to do the density. How many sounds do we want to hear? So let's say we want to hear only 3 horns at any given time. How often do we want to hear those horns? Maybe every 5 to 10 seconds. Maybe we want to adjust how many horns we hear based on density. All those settings we adjust here. And this is also a good way of pre-scoping our sounds, because we will know that no matter what, we will only hear 3 sounds at a time. The second part of the behavior asset is where we establish the positional settings. And this is basically where the sound is going to spawn. That's all that it is. The main feature for this is the transform source. So where in the world this is going to spawn. We didn't pay too much attention to that until we started with the first one, the ground height. When we realized traffic was being spawned based on the listener's distance, and now that players were able to climb, traffic was flying all across the city. So we don't want that. We want to make sure sounds like traffic stay at street level. So we are assigning some values to keep them on the ground. We're using that also for planes to keep them in the sky. So we're using both. And from that, we got other things that we're starting developing, like we can use transform source that will identify nearby surfaces, so we can spawn things next to a wall, things like that. So as soon as we find something that is not spawning in the right spot, then we come up with another transform source. And we have, of course, minimum and maximum distance. Those are the main settings for that. How do we add this into the system? You grab your behavior asset and you add it to the region where you want it to play, and you just set the density. Super sweet, super quick, and you can also reuse them. So if you want to add birds to all 3 different regions, you just drag and drop them and adjust the density. Lots of birds in the plaza, maybe a little bit of birds downtown, and no birds in the alley. All in like 2 minutes, you're done. So this is a game capture of beds and big worlds on the street. You will see AI traffic on the video, but they won't be making sound. It will be the big world. Great. So we're 2 topics away from wrapping up. Emitters is up next. Asset creation. This one is an interesting one because we have a limited amount of meters in the game. We have 3. We have an air conditioner. That's why I'm talking a lot about air conditioners. We have trees. So obviously we have birds. And then we have trash bags. So we have flies. Those are the 3 sounds that we have. And the challenge for us is how do we make the world sound good when it doesn't look good, right? We're doing a lot of work on faraway things that don't exist, but how do you make the sound feel real when there's nothing? You use like bare walls and an air conditioner and a tree. So we need to hopefully get to the point where we will be able to test more of this with more real props, but right now we don't. So we decided to spend time working on these 3 emitters, and hopefully out of that will come things that we'll be able to use once we have more access to other props. So one of the things we explored was using layers for air conditioners. So instead of having a single loop that is playing an air conditioner sound, we have 2 or 3. One, maybe it could be a fan, another could be rattling noise, and we have variations for those sounds. So when they mix and match, they play a slightly different version. Since they're everywhere and that's the only thing you hear, you want them to sound slightly different. We also want to make sure that they're consistent. So if the player is going towards an air conditioner and leaving and comes back, we want to be able to hear the same combination of sounds. So we're using deterministic randomization or random seed. So the system will remember the combination of sounds and settings that we had at that moment to make sure that we're hearing the same thing. On the new level, we don't have a lot of, again, emitters, but there's one cool one that I really like that I guess I will call it an emitter, but in the church, we had to add bells, church bells. So Dylan came up with the idea that every time there's like an hour mark in anybody's computer, like a personal computer, we will hear a bell sound. And it's really cool because if I'm working on a game, I hear a bell sound, I know I have a meeting. I need to quit. So it's getting there, trying to be creative, but that's what we're working with so far. In terms of the patch, we're using emitters and Little Big Worlds patches pretty much the same because they're all close by sounds. Have one shot and looping sounds, random pitch and volume. And we're using a SCADE's acoustic processing system to do all the calculations about reverb, distance attenuation, obstruction filtering, pan size, all that stuff. So that's all built into the patch. And then we have just the option of a listener with cone and no cone. So that's as far as we made it so far. How are we adding that to the game? We're using a similar approach of the audio region tags, but with objects. So we tag the blueprint, the object blueprint, with a tag, and we use the behavior asset with the same tag, so they can communicate with each other and know when to play. So we're trying to get creative on how to reuse those tags. We don't end up with 200 different air conditioners with capital A and not capital A's and all that stuff. So one of the things that we thought, well, sure, let's tag all the air conditioners with air conditioners, but let's use size. So small and big, obviously, different air conditioners. But it will allow us also to figure out ways to make global changes to all air conditioners, or maybe only to small ones. So that's what we've got so far with tags, but I'm sure we're going to end up rethinking a lot of the ways we're going to be doing this once we get more props into the game. Other things that we're doing with the emitters, using the same emitter with different density, as I was mentioning the example with the birds, and also doing global and local behaviors based on location. So the trash bags, we decided to add flies only in the trash bags that are placed in the alley. If you see a trash bag in a plaza, there's no flies. That's as far as we get. So you'll get to hear all three of them in a video. At least you'll see the debug. So as soon as the sound is enabled, like a green debug will show that they're playing, and then we'll move on to the next. So you'll hear the air conditioners first, then the flies, and then the birds. 3 emitters. Great. Well, last topic before we wrap up, but not least, scoping. So how do we scope ambient sounds in the system? We use scope priority. So we assign a priority to each of the sounds based on how often they play. If it's a horn, they're low priority. If it's a car alarm that you hear once in a while, maybe you want to hear that more often. We are doing a queue system where we are allowed to play a specific set of sounds based on the console or how what's the performance of the console. So we have 4 different options. Ultra quality is like a high-end console or a PC. It's allowed to play up to 15 sounds at the same time. And the lowest tier so far is 6 sounds. So anything in between depending on that. The sounds that are not allowed to play but want to play are placed into a queue system. And like they're going to be on cooldown mode for 5 seconds. If there's a slot that opens up, they will be allowed to play. And if there doesn't, they lose their chance and need to wait for the next time. So I'll show you, in the first half of this video, you will hear the ultra quality, so 15 sounds playing at the same time, or at the same time, but spawn at the same time. And then the second half of the video will only be playing 6. That will be the lowest quality. You will get to see Dylan's scoping debug system. So you will see on the top of the screen the list of sounds that are playing, and at the bottom the ones that are on the queue list waiting to be triggered. That's it. Now I'm just talking to you. No. Thank you. Actually, I just want to wrap it up with a few more slides, but the content is that's it. So we learned about skate. What are the goals behind building the ambient system, the main concepts about the ambient system, how to add sound to that, and how to implement it to the game. What's next? Well, the main thing, we want to add more functionality to the system. We're still in pre-alpha, so I'm sure there's going to be new things that will come up that we need to keep in mind. So there's some more to come, and things we didn't consider before. So having the new level is going to give us a lot of opportunities to test a larger scale with more sounds and with more space in different areas. We also want to make sure that the workflows that we are doing, like tagging objects and making volumes on the maps and all those things, are aligned with the dev team. Who is going to do that? Is it going to be us? Is it going to be them? All those things are important to always have as early as possible, very clear. More functionality, things that we added, as I was saying, the nearby surface, wanted and unwanted tags. We added that too, just in case. Lots of debug options that we're looking into, and mixing is a big one. How are we going to integrate these with mixing? We also want to build more systems that will communicate with this one. So we recently did a pass on sense of height. So how will the player feel if they're like at the top of a building? They'll hear more wind. Maybe they get a little bit to the edge of the building, get feeling of vertigo. There's maybe here a bit more of the city when they get closer, and not so much when they're out in the middle of the rooftop. Things like that, we're already working on that. We're just gonna get started soon, like next week or something, on working on the wind system. We're doing our Zoom calls and starting getting prep for that. And the last one on the list will be water. So those are the main things that we want to add to the system. Also, people say, well, sound doesn't really match the feel of the city, right? And it's because the city doesn't have a feel yet. And that's the next step that we want to take. We want to focus on the narrative and the style of the city. What is it that we want to build? Is it going to be fun? Is it going to be lively? Is that what everybody is looking for, the dev team and us? How are we going to source those assets? Are we going to record some of them? Are we going to outsource them? Is it okay to use library? What's going to look like using assets for the game? There's few more ambience elements that we want to introduce. Diegetic music. We find music will help us with the problem of the not having enough emitters. So we're already working on that. Identifying areas within the city will make sense to play music. So there's like a food cart. We have this kebab music playing there. You know, we're getting creative. There's a sign, oh, that's a cafe. Okay, cool, let's add music there. And that alone adds a lot. So hopefully in the near future, on the playtest, you might hear some diegetic music there. And also, of course, the tech behind it is it's taking time, but we're getting there. And then the last piece of the puzzle will be Walla. You probably heard a little bit of Walla here. Those were early attempts, but we didn't just really have a lot of time to focus on Walla, so we're going to do a good pass on that and hopefully add it soon. As promised, this is a video of the Sand Amsterdam, the new level. This is a gameplay capture of the latest playtest that took place in July. You won't hear any skateboard sounds, only ambiances. There's a few more sounds that we added there, more little big worlds, as we call them. So there it is. So what's next? Well, takeaways. That's our last but not least for tonight. I really recommend doing early prototyping if you have the time during pre-pro. It helps a lot to get a clarity on the goals and directions of what you're trying to build. Aligning early with the dev team, making sure that what you're building is on the same path and you're not going too off from what they're planning to do. Establishing a solid tech foundation is super key. Once you have that up and running, you don't have to worry about it. You can go and start working on your content. It's all taken care of. You just do minor tweaks, but you don't have to worry about it. So we find that's going to be helpful for us, especially a live service game. Having a very solid foundation will help a lot. Open world need to be flexible and also have solid workflows. We're in pre-alpha. Lots of things are going to change, but open world, so we can have lots of different options for things to happen. So definitely keeping that in mind. Prototyping on a small set of sounds, very useful. Don't try to make all the cities sound perfect. Just focus on a small area. Make sure that what you're building is working, and then you can start expanding. And using specific test cases. So try to go for the edge cases, not just focus, about skating, but what could be if somebody's jumping off a cliff and grabbing onto something. All the things that you can think of, try to put them into your design docs so you're not designing something just for a handful of examples. And last but not least, sharing early development has been a great pleasure tonight. I feel like we should do more of this, allowed to just share what we're working on. It's you know, sharing temp content on a temp level with all of you is like out of a comfort zone. Most people want to share the polished stuff, but I think we all know what it takes to do this. So it's just nice to share and just to, yeah, these are the things that work, these are the things that didn't work, and it's all good. And hopefully you get to listen to more progress of the stuff that we're doing, and I get to listen to the stuff that you're doing too. So that's it for us tonight, and I guess we're taking any questions.